was a dark, blustering evening at the station. Sir Topham had closed the railway early on account of the weather. The engines were waiting for the signal to return to their sheds. "Maybe one of us should tell a story to pass the time," Thomas suggested. The engines were pleased with Thomas's idea.
"I have the perfect story for tonight,"
said James with a sly grin.
"A long time ago, there was a brave engine named Hawin who was always eager to help. One night, he popped into the shed. One our manager came to see him.
"Hawin, would you go to the end of the tracks to pick up a coach that was left behind?"
"Of course,"
Hawin replied, and he set out into the dark, foggy night. But as Hawin reached the end of the line, the fog was so thick he could hardly see anything.
"Looks like I'll have to wait until morning,"
he said to himself, and he settled in an old shed for the night. Late that night, Hawin woke to a noise coming from below the shed. He opened his eyes and saw long fingers reaching through the floorboards. Terrified, Hawin raced out of the shed with a horrible engine-eating monster chasing him through the fog.
Then what happened?
Percy asked timidly.
That's where the story ends. No one ever heard from Hawin ever again.
But what about the monster?
"Oh, don't listen to him, little Percy,"
said Gordon.
"It's just a silly story from James after all."
Soon the engines began settling into their shed berths for the night. But as Percy settled into his berth, there was a loud rattling sound. Percy jumped.
"Thomas, Gordon, help! Save me from the monster!"
But it was only James bumping a flat car with Scrap nearby to give Percy a fright.
I'm a monster! I'm a monster!
"You certainly act like one sometimes,"
said Edward.
"Trying to frighten hard-working engines when they're trying to get some rest."
Percy felt rather silly for causing such a fuss.
"It's okay, Percy,"
said Henry.
"Sometimes good imaginations think bad thoughts."
Later that night, Thomas woke up to a strange noise. "Stop it, James," said Thomas sternly, but James was fast asleep. If it wasn't James, then maybe I do have a monster underneath my shed, thought Thomas, and he stayed awake all night just to be on the safe side. Thomas was awfully tired when he met Percy at Knapford Yards the next morning. "Oh, hello, Percy," he yawned. "You didn't hear any strange noises last night, did you?"
"I was had to change the city prank,"
Percy said in annoyance.
"But I did dream about a lovely seaside trip, though,"
he said happily, and then he puffed away. Now Thomas felt silly for staying up all night, but he didn't want anyone else to know that, especially James. In the middle of the day, Thomas was very tired and was running behind schedule.
"You look like you haven't got any sleep, Thomas,"
said Henry.
"Is everything alright?"
"Don't worry, Henry. I'm fine. I just had a hard time falling asleep." Then James passed by with his passenger train.
What's the matter, Thomas?
He said.
Monsters keep you up at night?
Thomas barely had enough steam and energy to make it back to Titmer's sheds. The other engines were telling stories again. But Thomas was too tired and went to sleep. Sometime that night, Thomas woke with a fright. The noises were back, and they seemed to be closer than before. Who's there? No one replied, except for the eerie sound of a... This woke James up.
Thomas, stop that noise.
He yawned. It's not me, James. It's the monster.
What monster?
You're one. And it's right outside the shed. Suddenly, Thomas's shed doors began to rattle on their hinges. It's trying to get in, whispered Thomas. Eventually, the banging stopped, and the door swung wide open. It's just outside the door, whispered Thomas. Then, right in front of Thomas and James, two strange glowing eyes glared at them.
Help! Help!
Yelled Thomas and James. The other engines woke up with a fright. Save us from the monster! Said the two engines.
Thomas, open your eyes.
What are you laughing at, Gordon? Said Thomas.
Yeah, can't you see there's a monster right outside of our shed?
James said in fear.
Not anymore. Now the monster is inside your shed.
Thomas and James opened one eye and saw a hedgehog?
You were afraid of a tiny little hedgehog?
The other engines laughed, including Thomas, but James was embarrassed.
Percy has a good imagination, Thomas,
Said Gordon.
but I think yours is even better.
You're right, Gordon, said Thomas. It's the only thing in the world that can turn an adorable little hedgehog into a big, scary monster.